Okay, let's unpack this. We're doing a deep dive today into a life story that's, well, it's pretty dramatic. It really makes you rethink the whole American dream narrative.
Yeah, we're talking about Farris Wilks.
Exactly. A guy who starts out in, genuine poverty, born in rural Texas, Cisco, literally in a goat shed. No electricity, no running water.
It's almost hard to picture.
Right. And yet, fast forward to 2011, he and his brothers sell their company for, what was it, an estimated $3.5 billion.
But what makes this story so fascinating, and what our sources really dig into, is that the money wasn't the end point. Not at all. It was actually the start of what he saw as his real mission.
He didn't just retire to an island somewhere.
No. The picture painted is of this oilfield preacher who then becomes this really significant, sometimes controversial power player.
So our goal here is to figure out how that pivot worked. We've got sources covering his business side, his move back into ministry, and then how he strategically used that huge amount of wealth.
The core question is, how does someone so intensely private gain such massive public influence? And the key seems to be this complete fusion of his money and his religious beliefs.
Which leads us straight to the central paradox, right?
Exactly. For Wilks, according to everything we've read, money wasn't freedom. It wasn't about escaping his past. It was a summons, a duty.
A duty. That's the key phrase.
Yeah. This idea that having immense wealth is actually a mandate from God. That's like the operating system behind every big decision he made after selling his company, Frac Tech.
That really cuts against the grain of how most people think about wealth today, as the ultimate freedom, self-expression.
Completely different mindset.
So to get that, we need to go back to where that sense of duty was formed, the goat shed.
Yeah, the sources really emphasize those early years in Cisco, just a constant fight for basic survival, his family using scrap wood, old blankets, just to try and keep the cold out. His dad was a bricklayer, struggling.
It wasn't just physical hardship, was it?
No, it fundamentally shaped how he viewed everything scarcity, providence, the very meaning of money. The shift wasn't just poor to rich. It was deeper. Money went from being about survival
to being a tool
to serve something much bigger than himself.
Yeah. And the sources have his own words on this, which are, they really crystallize it. Money to me is not freedom. It's responsibility. If God gives you more, you're supposed to do more.
That quote basically explains everything that follows. It's the engine driving his whole strategy.
It's why becoming a billionaire wasn't the end game.
Right. It wasn't about personal comfort. It was about assembling the resources, the war chest, for what he saw as a moral mission. That idea, wealth as a divine mandate, born from poverty, that's the core drive behind his business approach and eventually his political involvement.
Okay, but to fund a mission like that, you need serious capital. Which brings us to Frac Tech services. This is early 2000s, right? The fracking boom is starting to take off.
Yeah, hydraulic fracturing was unlocking these huge shale reserves. Big energy companies were rushing in, drilling like crazy. But drilling is high risk, very volatile.
High risk, high reward, but also high potential for loss.
Exactly. Wilks saw the smarter play. He and his brother Dan started Frac Tech in 2002. They didn't drill. They provided the services needed for drilling.
The pressure pumping equipment, the sand, the pant, the specialized crews.
All of it. They were essentially selling the picks and shovels during the gold rush.
That's the classic analogy, yeah.
And it was genius, business-wise. Focusing on the service side meant they were way less exposed to the wild swings in oil and gas prices compared to the drillers themselves. They built this huge company based on reliable demand for specialized services, much lower risk profile.
And then came the big move. May 2011. The exit.
Strategically, it was, pretty brilliant. They sold 70% of Frac Tech. The price tag was estimated at $3.5 billion. And the buyers included major players like Chesapeake Energy.
But the timing, that's what's crucial here, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely critical. They sold right at the peak. Literally months later, natural gas prices just tanked. The whole fracking sector went into this prolonged downturn. Lots of companies went bankrupt.
So they didn't just sell high, they sold perfectly high, just before the bottom fell out. That suggests some serious foresight.
It really does. It shows deep knowledge of the sector, but also maybe the discipline to know when enough is enough for the mission they had in mind.
And what did they do with all that cash? They didn't just park it?
No slowing down.
Yeah.
They immediately started buying land, huge tracts, ended up with over 670,000 acres across Texas, Idaho, Montana.
Wow, that's enormous. Almost like a modern feudal lord or something. How does owning all that land fit the divine mandate idea?
Well, If you see wealth as a responsibility, land becomes this foundational long-term asset. It represents stability, stewardship over generations. It's tangible.
So less about quick financial returns, more about
a duty-aligned investment, maybe, tied to a belief about caring for the earth, long-term responsibility.
Okay, so the exit was smart. The initial reinvestment in land was strategic. But the real pivot, the surprising part, is where Farris Wilks puts his own time and energy next.
Right. While other billionaires are, funding space trips or buying super yachts.
He goes back to the pulpit.
Yeah. Back to being a pastor at the Assembly of Yahweh, Seventh-day Church in Cisco, Texas, his local stone chapel.
That contrast is something else. Global scale finances, very local, very modest ministry focus. And he stays incredibly private, right?
Fiercely private. The sources stress this. Rarely gives interviews. No personal website you can look up. Very few recorded sermons are even out there. He's personally almost invisible.
But his influence isn't invisible at all.
Not even close. And that influence comes from his refusal to separate things. For him, faith, business, political action, it's all one interconnected thing.
This is where we get into the ideology that's guiding the spending, isn't it?
Exactly. The sources point to him preaching a version of Christian dominionism. Now, just to clarify for listeners, dominionism isn't just a general belief in God. It's more specific. It's the idea that biblical principles should govern all aspects of society.
Government, law, education.
Right. All of it. So every big financial decision gets viewed through that lens. Is it advancing righteousness? Not just is it making money?
And that framework explains why he uses his wealth almost like a megaphone for some very specific and often controversial viewpoints.
It does. We have to report these impartially, but the sources cite specific sermons where he's been quoted calling homosexuality a perversion equal to bestiality and incest, and also questioning the scientific consensus on man-made climate change.
And these aren't just personal opinions expressed in church.
No, they become the basis for his philanthropic strategy.
Well,
through the 13 Foundation, which is named after his large family, he channels money very systematically to scale up these specific beliefs.
So funding groups like
ultra-conservative organizations, like Focus on the Family, PragerU, the Family Research Council. It's strategic philanthropy aimed very directly at shaping culture and policy according to his specific worldview. He's essentially buying influence.
He really is the definition of a quiet kingmaker. Doesn't want the spotlight himself.
He wants control. And the sources suggest he achieves this through what they call a strategic double influence loop. It sounds complex, but it's actually quite clever.
Okay, break that down for us. What's the double loop?
It's basically a two-track approach, working from the bottom up and the top down at the same time.
Okay. Loop one?
Loop one is the bottom-up power. Think grassroots activism, but fueled by billionaire dollars. He heavily funds local groups, especially things like parent advocacy organizations, aiming to influence local school boards.
School boards seem so granular for someone with that kind of money. Why there?
Because that's where you shape institutions from the ground level. By backing these groups, he helps frame issues like school choice or school vouchers, not just as policy debates, but as moral crusades. It builds that passionate local support and starts to capture governance from the bottom.
Okay, that makes sense. Building pressure from below. And loop two?
Loop two is the top-down policy capture. This is where the big money really comes into play. Bankrolling powerful super PACs, Defend Texas Liberty was the most prominent recent example, and also influential think tanks.
And these groups aren't just taking donations, they're actively
drafting model legislation. They're lobbying state lawmakers hard. They're working to influence who gets appointed as judges. They basically manufacture the policies that then meet that grassroots pressure coming up from loop one.
It's a complete ecosystem. Can you give examples of the kinds of policies this system pushes?
Yeah, this combined approach has been really effective in pushing for certain state laws, particularly in Texas, but with influence elsewhere. Things like new restrictions on how gender is discussed in schools, further limits on abortion access, and a big push to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI programs at public universities.
Just to clarify for listeners, DEI programs aim to support underrepresented groups.
Correct. And Wilks's funding goes to groups actively working to legally restrict or eliminate those kinds of initiatives.
So he's building this pipeline, voter pressure, drafted legislation, lawmaker action. It's not loud, splashy politics.
It's long power, as you said, aiming for influence that's invisible but irreversible, something built into the structures, designed to last way beyond any single election cycle or news story.
But even quiet power can hit turbulence. In 2023, that PAIC you mentioned, Defend Texas Liberty, got caught in a huge storm.
Yeah, a major crisis. Key figures associated with the PAIC were found to have met with Nick Fuentes, who's a widely known white nationalist. It blew up nationally. Huge scrutiny, politicians rushing to give back donations.
You'd expect someone focused on quiet influence to maybe pull back after that, right? Lay low.
That would be the conventional wisdom. But Wilks did the exact opposite. It was almost a masterclass in strategic adaptation, or maybe even escalation. No apologies, no retreat.
So what did he do? How did he adapt financially?
Step one was basically a rebrand and restructure. Defend Texas Liberty quickly faded from prominence, and a new pay emerged. Texans United for a conservative majority.
Okay, new name.
But the money flowed immediately. He personally poured over $2 million into this new pay within just a few months. The signal was crystal clear. The controversy was just a speed bump. The mission continues, maybe even stronger.
That kind of resilience, that tenacity, it has to link back to that core belief system we talked about earlier, the money is duty idea.
It seems to. He likely views political setbacks very differently than a typical politician would. The sources mentioned he tends to frame pushback like this as spiritual refinement.
Spiritual refinement.
Yeah, there's a sentiment from his sermons that kind of captures it. The storm doesn't mean you're wrong. Sometimes it means the enemy sees you as a threat.
Wow. So failure or scandal isn't a reason to quit, it's almost validation.
In that framework, yes. The lesson seems to be that, for him, real failure is surrender. Temporary scandals don't matter much if your eyes are on shaping the next generation, changing the long-term ideological landscape.
So bringing this all together, Farris Wilks goes from a goat shed to $3.5 billion. But instead of using it for personal freedom, he sees it as duty. A duty to impose a specific moral and legal structure onto society, directly challenging the idea of a pluralistic public square.
And that really highlights the ultimate takeaway here. True, lasting power, the kind Wilks seems to be pursuing, isn't about headlines or fame.
Right.
It's the kind that gets woven deep into institutions from the local school board right up to the state capitol. It becomes embedded. He chose to make his impact invisible but irreversible.
Which leaves us with a pretty potent question for you, the listener, to think about. If you really took your own deepest convictions, whatever they are, personal, professional, political, and viewed them not just as beliefs, but as a mandate you had a duty to execute, how would that change the decisions you make? Professionally, philanthropically?
What kind of long-term, maybe even irreversible action would that sense of duty compel you to take?